Good evening, everyone. Excited to welcome you to Right to Repair 101. Because we are keeping this short and going to try to honor everybody's time so you can get off to dinner and such on time, we're going to go ahead and start, and people just continue rolling in the doors. So I'm going to get the presentation shared now. Oh, there we go. How's that look? Okay. All right, so we are going to start with some welcome introductions. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, please, if you can, drop those. Well, really, honestly, it doesn't matter. If you drop them in the chat or the Q&A, I know some folks, places prefer Q&A. We have both options set up, but drop them in there. We are going to save our questions until the end to ensure that all of our speakers have time to present, and then I will be monitoring those throughout, and we'll share those, and hopefully all your questions that might come up during my portion will be answered by the rest of the panel or vice versa. So we'll have some good discussion. We have about 10 minutes planned for questions at the end. So there should be plenty of time if you have things come up. With that, I would like to go ahead and introduce our panelists. Dustin doesn't have a video tonight, but he's on the screen there. So starting with Tammy Gillard, she is with Minnesota Tech for Success, and she'll be talking about the tech and education side. Dustin Siemers is the owner of Tech Fixers in Shakopee. He'll be talking about tech and small businesses and how specifically in the world of electronics this is an issue. And Lourey from Minnesota Farmers Union will be talking about the agricultural perspective. And we know that there are other aspects of right to repair, like appliances and other areas, but we figured that for a short session like this would give you some good information to start with. We'll also be talking about next steps, how you can get involved, and then have the Q&A at the end. All right, with that, I am going to do about 10 minutes to set the stage for what right to repair is and why it matters, why we hope that you will care, and how you can, and then the steps later will be how you can join us. At a very, very high level, right to repair is your right to repair what you own. The belief of many folks is that if you can't fix it, you don't own it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things that we can't fix these days. And this is for a variety of reasons that we'll go into tonight. But at a very high level, right to repair legislation would require that manufacturers, original equipment manufacturers, provide access to things such as replacement parts, tools, and information. So diagnostics, manuals, schematics. And that's a very high level. We'll go into all the details next, but just if you had to do a high level summary, that's what we're talking about. You'll also hear it referred to sometimes as digital fair repair. In fact, the legislation in Minnesota, that's the name of the actual bill. Those words are things we use interchangeably. So if you hear that and wonder if that's the same thing, we're talking about the same topic. What's the issue? Why are we talking about this? Why is this a problem? The big thing is that technology is in everything. It's not just your consumer electronics anymore. It's farming equipment, coffee makers, washing machines, medical equipment. A lot of that in the past didn't involve all the bells and whistles of technological advances. It was very mechanical. So if you were fixing a tractor, it was a motor and engine. You didn't have all of the computers hooked up that could provide all the different things we have now. And so it was much easier to just do on your own and do with the tools that you had. That has changed. All this tech, though, has had the impact that intentionally or unintentionally has allowed manufacturers to limit access to repair. Sometimes there are things like proprietary tools where you can't get something open unless you have the specific tool that opens that product. Diagnostic equipment can be required. So if you think about, you got to hook it up to this machine to tell you what's actually wrong. Maybe you can get the parts, but you don't know what parts you need until you have that equipment, and that equipment sometimes is only accessible to certain folks. Products are designed to be unrepairable. Part of this is that phrase we hear a lot, planned obsolescence. They want you to buy new stuff. That's part of the truth, is that our economy works in, unfortunately, in many ways because we continue to buy stuff, and repair hasn't been factored in a meaningful way as an important part of that. And so sometimes that's done intentionally. Sometimes it's just because of how it's not designed with intention to be repaired. And so needing to demand that that's part of it. Again, manuals and schematics are often unavailable. This isn't true across the board for a lot. And sometimes the schematics that really matter, the ones that if I open up my cell phone and I accidentally push here, am I going to crack my entire screen in the process? Where if I did it on the other side, I would have no problem. Those types of things are part of what we are looking for. The other thing is that consumer behavior has changed. We aren't necessarily a repair culture anymore as maybe previous generations were. My grandparents and great-grandparents certainly fixed more of their stuff than I do. And part of that has allowed this situation where consumers don't demand access to repair. And fortunately, that's changing, but that's kind of what has created where the situation we are in. The repair marketplace is being undermined by manufacturer monopoly on repair. You see this a lot through authorized repair entities. So where you are a particular entity that wants to fix cell phones and you're the only one that's authorized by the manufacturer, you have special access to parts and those tools. And so it effectively monopolizes that sector. And then independent folks are often left doing aftermarket or salvaged parts, which doesn't necessarily always work very well. Before we go further, I also wanted to note, and this presentation will be made available after the webinar, but the FTC did a report just under 2 years ago called Nixing the Fix. And I wanted to make note of that here because they go into massive detail on all of this, including some of the other issues we'll go into. But if you're into that kind of thing, it's a very interesting report that essentially says, yes, we hear these things, we know these things are issues, and here's why this is important to pass this kind of legislation. Why repair matters. And this isn't just right to repair related. This is in general, but it is very much part of our conversation tonight. Repair creates jobs. We know that, especially there's a graphic on the next slide, but compared to disposal, that repair creates a lot of jobs, and they're good green jobs. They're quality ones where people can use their technical abilities and really get a good career. And so we really want to advocate for those. My organization, Reuse Minnesota, we support the reuse sector. And so we want to make sure that those jobs are an important part of our economy. Repair is local. It's really difficult to send your dishwasher back to the country of origin for manufacturing for repair. And so that's something you're going to do. So having your local appliance person, repair person is really important. Repair extends the life of resources. And from our perspective, the environmental side is a big part of this. It ensures that the resources that we take out of the earth can be in cycle as long as possible. And while recycling can do some of that, it certainly is not the same as being able to be repaired. That also, at the other end, reduces the materials that have to be managed by our solid waste facilities, by our counties and our city governments when they're dealing with that stuff. And e-waste is the fastest growing portion of the waste stream. And so this is a huge issue, and that did not go down during the pandemic, that only grew. And so being able to fix more of these things is an important part of ensuring that we can minimize how much we're having to recycle and dispose. It builds resilience. It helps deal with things like supply chain issues, which definitely came up during the pandemic. So repair using things that you already have in your local community and fixing those things allows us to have access to the technology we need. And the other issue specifically, and with right to repair, is that there's often limited access to those authorized repair shops, especially in greater Minnesota, rural areas where you might have to send your cell phone down to the Twin Cities or a larger area where you can get that fixed. And so that's a big issue when you have folks who rely on that technology for their jobs. And Stu might talk about that a little bit in relation to agriculture specifically, but that's a big issue. This is the graphic I mentioned, just per 1,000 ton of electronics. It's a big difference when you think about 200 jobs can be created compared to 15 for recycling or 1 for landfilling. So it's a big impact on our economy. What needs to be done? A big thing is removing those monopolies, and not saying that you can't have those authorized repair shops, but ensuring that the independent folks and individuals have access to those same materials and same tools. Promoting design for repair. Obviously, this is on the upstream side, but if you're in the manufacturing sector, the design sector for products, this is huge. And I think a lot of consumer demand is pushing this side as well. People want to be able to fix their stuff and make it last longer. Demanding removable batteries. Batteries are often a reason that things stop working. And so being able to have access to those is a big thing. If it's glued in with a bunch of different things and you can't get to that, that's an issue. Building standards for what does this mean? What are all the things that are necessary to be able to repair things is important. And then requiring enforcement. If we're going to pass legislation, we need to ensure that it actually can be enforced. A few things, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I want to note it because it's always important to know what your opposition is. What are people saying on the other side? And one of the things we hear is that repair is modification. So if you're going to get people who are going to make changes, and they're going to, and Stu might talk about this a little bit as it relates to agricultural equipment, but they're going to make changes that are going to be problematic. This is not true. Repair is restoration to original use. If someone's making illegal modifications, those changes are illegal with or without right to repair. It doesn't matter if we pass this legislation, those changes are always going to be illegal. The other thing we hear is that repair or right to repair requires manufacturers to disclose trade secrets. This is specifically noted in the bill and addressed that is not true. And so that's an issue that's been laid out in the language. Fair and reasonable pricing is unfair to authorized repair entities. And this is something we definitely wanted to clarify and address. So this is actually being addressed in the language for this year's bill. I don't have the specific language, but we're making changes to ensure that the understanding is that, yes, if they're authorized repair places, they may have different agreements with manufacturers. We still want independent shops to be able to get the repair parts at a reasonable price, but we understand that there's concerns about those relationships. So we're working on making changes there. The other concern is that some folks are concerned, and it's important, safety is important, that folks will hurt themselves. And we definitely don't want to see anybody get hurt. But what the Federal Trade Commission found in that report is that it's unfounded. There is just not evidence that this is true. And in fact, there is potentially a higher likelihood of harm because you don't have access to the OEM parts, those original parts or tools, because you're working with aftermarket stuff that wasn't originally designed to work with those products or tools, and you're working, you're doing these workarounds that may in fact be what's causing the danger. And then last, before I hand it off to Tammy, a little bit about history in Minnesota. The bill was first introduced in 2015, which you'll note is 8 years ago, and that might seem like a really long time. And while many of us here would have loved to see this pass that first session, if you're familiar with legislative processes, you know that sometimes it takes a few goes. It's impacted by legislative makeup, legislative priorities, agency priorities, and so sometimes you got to just keep coming back. Excitingly, though, last year it did pass in the Minnesota House, so that was a big deal. That was very exciting. It went through committees and passed, did make it into the Judiciary Omnibus Bill as part of House File 1156. Unfortunately, it wasn't heard at all on the Senate side. It did get put into that omnibus bill, but if you were following in Minnesota, there was pretty much nothing passed last session. There was 2 omnibus bills, I think, that went anywhere, and so pretty much nothing got done. We really hope and encourage our legislators to do something different this session, but unfortunately, a lot of really good legislation got left behind because very little happened. Right to Repair Coalition in Minnesota includes a lot of different organizations. Those of us on the call today, especially Tammy and Stu, have been involved for a really long time. We have a number of different folks: Repowered, World Data Systems, Alta Tech. We have a lot of folks who have been doing this work. I know I'll leave somebody out, but a lot of folks have put hours into this for many years, and so we continue to do that work together. Our coalition is under the coordination of Shep Harris, who is a lobbyist with Frederickson and Byron. He keeps us well connected to the Capitol. He knows all the folks and where to find them, and so he is our fantastic director in all of this, and we really appreciate everything he does. The other thing I wanted to note is that fortunately, we've had the strong support of the Minnesota Attorney General, Keith Ellison, the last couple of years. He's spoken on behalf of the bill. He just mentioned it recently in a hearing, so we really appreciate his support and his office's support of this issue. The other thing I want to note is that our bill includes electronics, ag equipment, appliances, and a bunch of other things. It does specifically exclude motor vehicles and medical devices. And that matters because motor vehicles are already under a separate right to repair thing through a memorandum of understanding that came into effect a little over a decade ago after some legislation was passed in Massachusetts. So that's excluded, so it doesn't interfere with that. And then medical devices are excluded in our legislation. Oh, Tammy, I was not correct. I have one more slide. What's happening on a national level, just to give us a context, is that right to repair has been moving forward in many states for a few years. Minnesota is one of the longer ones, but fortunately every year there's states that are adding to that. And our friends at repair.org and USPIRG are a big part of the reason that happens. Excitingly, New York passed the Fair Repair Act, and that was signed in December for consumer electronics. Unfortunately, it was trimmed down pretty significantly, but it's an important first step. There's got to be those first dominoes. And so we are very excited about it. There is a link I will put from USPIRG that provides a pretty good synopsis of that. So if you're interested in reading more of that, or you can just Google it, you can find a lot of information out there. Colorado also passed a law last year that is now in effect for power wheelchairs specifically. It might not be something that a lot of us think about, but it's a big issue because there are very few manufacturers and they control a lot of the repair. The EU also has a law related to appliances specifically that went into effect in 2021. And I also want to note the FTC has had some lawsuits related to illegal warranty claims. So companies like Harley-Davidson would tell folks that if you fix your motorcycle, it will void the warranty. So they would scare people out of repairing their own stuff, which is not legal. They can't do that. And the FTC has come down, fortunately, I would say fairly hard on these entities, these businesses, saying you can't do that. You got to stop scaring people and saying they can't fix their own stuff. All right, with that then, I will pass it to Tammy and she will give us a bit more about the picture around education.
Thank you, Emily. Well, good evening, everyone. There's a lot to cover, so I'll try to be brief, but just a little bit about Minnesota Tech for Success. We were formerly Minnesota Computers for Schools. We underwent a name change this past year, but we've been in the business of refurbishing computer equipment since 1997. And today we do a lot of recycling and refurbishing of computer equipment, and we work to place it with schools and nonprofits across the state. And we're doing a lot of work with students as well. You can go to the next slide. So really our key values are digital inclusion, community connection, and sustainability. I think it's hugely important. As people know, especially with the pandemic, it's just become increasingly more and more important for people to have access to technology. And it's just really a key piece of who we are and what we do to be able to provide that equipment to schools and to students so that they can accomplish their goals and their academics. Really connecting with the community and that sustainability piece, doing our work in an environmentally sustainable way. We'll talk about that in a minute, and to be able to really provide those top tier resources for our programs. Our largest programs are Computers for Classrooms. So again, working with placing that computer equipment with schools and nonprofits across the state. We've just celebrated our 25th anniversary, and we've placed over 100,000 computers across the state. So this work that we're doing with Right to Repair is so critically important. And, we wouldn't be able to do it if we were shut down from getting those necessary parts and pieces and tools and manuals and things. Tech Connect, this is really a program that's grown significantly during the pandemic. Our work to give students access to technology went up over 800% because all of a sudden every family needed equipment so that kids could be connecting with their teachers when they were at home during the pandemic. And even now, as you see with these most recent cold days and snow days, now that tool is in place, it's an expectation that you're going to be able to get online and be able to study and do your work virtually with your classes. So it's just ever so important. And then we also provide STEM training. We do youth programs and we do adult programs, teaching individuals those basic certifications so that they can repair technology and enter into the IT career workforce. So again, we've placed over 100,000 computers. We've taken really over, I need to update this now that we've completed 2022, but over 6 million pounds of e-waste has been kept out of the landfill. And as Emily mentioned, there's a huge impact when we give our reports to our donors. We try to share that education of how many, the gas emissions that have been saved. It can relate to how many cars we're keeping off the road. It's significant if we can be reusing our technology and giving it that extended life. It's got a dramatic, impact on our environment. And then just, we've trained over 1,800 students in that refurbishing and recycling for students. I'm sharing this. We spend a lot of time and money on providing certifications. We're AAA NAID certified, which is a data wiping certification. R2 version 3 is really that recycling certification to give our donors that added confidence that we're, providing this work in an environmentally friendly way. We also have ISO certifications that we complete each year to show that we got kind of a quality system and it meets the environmental standards and health standards. I'm bringing this up because if anyone has followed Right to Repair, there are times when people insinuate that people shouldn't just be playing around with technology and repairing it. There are a whole lot of us that do this right. We spend a long time studying, getting certified to show people we know what we're doing. We're providing good quality equipment and that we stand behind the work that we do. So I think it's just, it needs to be mentioned that there are a lot of us that have been fighting this to say, you know what, we work hard to provide reliable equipment. And all right, so that's it for me. I know Emily will share a slide at the end. I'll be here to answer questions at the end and my contact information is there, but really appreciate everyone's time tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. Appreciate it. All right.
Thanks, Tammy.
Dustin, all you.
My name is Dustin Siemers, and I represent not only Reuse Minnesota, but my business, Tech Fixers. We're down in the Southwest, Shakopee, Minnesota. And we also we do a lot of the same things on a smaller scale. We primarily repair consumer electronics, sometimes industrial, circuit boards, that kind of thing. And repair has its challenges, especially electronics repair. There's always kind of been this disposable mentality with tech that, well, as soon as you take your computer out of the box, it's obsolete. That's really not the case anymore, with more and more being offloaded to the cloud. Your computer is basically just a window to the world. A 5-year-old computer or phone is perfectly adequate for most people. Also, we all know there's anti-competitive actions being taken by the tech companies to make the products difficult, sometimes even impossible, and they're only going to allow it when it's profitable for them and their buddies. It's not illegal because, well, the antitrust laws haven't been updated since like Theodore Roosevelt. So also supply chain issues, and it's not just a COVID thing. Parts are extremely difficult to obtain. And repair shops sometimes have to hoard them just so we have them. Also, since we're working against the repair, the kind of the anti-repair technology, it almost requires a set of skills that we have to almost kind of hack the device in order to repair it, which just makes it more difficult for everybody. And as Jay-Z said, on to the next. Phone batteries are of particular importance. Uh, Batteries are only designed to last for a certain number of cycles. Um, and for a lot of people, if you're a heavy user, you may be able to get a year out of them, maybe 2. And also from a safety perspective, batteries are everybody's walking around with a bomb in their pocket. Do you want it to be a new bomb or an old one? Batteries, they start when they start degrading, they start puffing up, they can damage the device. They can literally start on fire. Like around the time when the Samsung Note 7 debacle happened, there it was pretty close to not allowing phones on airplanes for that reason. They really need to be designed to be replaced. But the tech companies are working actively to prevent that. There's specific microcontrollers with a cryptographic lock that will remove functionality if you were to replace it. Even with what you see here is a superior aftermarket part. It actually has more capacity, more talk time, more runtime. The design may be brilliantly designed, but it's not designed for repair. Phone screens, that's a common and maintenance item. I think everybody has or knows somebody that has broken their phone screen. Unfortunately, for no real reason, they're designed to lose functionality because they're paired with the original device. There's misleading warnings, basically saying, oh, like so in this iPhone, it says that this phone doesn't have a genuine Apple display. Well, that basically the other side of the coin is, okay, well, it must be counterfeit then. And it's a trick to basically reduce the perceived quality of aftermarket and independent repair. Also, the supply chain issues, particularly like with Samsung devices. I can go to the next. Also, this was something that kind of came up as a means of anti-theft. The idea being that the phone cannot be used or transferred to anybody but the original owner. The problem is people, when they break their phone screen and they get a new one, they don't, and they may not even be able to unlock their device. And the tech companies have embraced this because they know that it greatly reduces the amount of devices available on the secondary market. Being a repair shop is tough. It's, I mean, we really enjoy doing it, but it's a hard business to be in and to get into. The need for very expensive equipment is a significant barrier to entry for somebody that just wants to kind of get started. Well, like we have thousands and thousands of dollars of equipment, including high-powered fiber laser. We have those 5 programmers right there. That's probably $2,000 in equipment. And that's just for iPhones. And this isn't a big deal, but even down to like the screwdrivers, Apple actually licensed a very proprietary fastener and the screwdriver, making it as difficult as possible for anyone to get that. All right, so what can we do about it? Well, slam dunk is we should prevent the tech companies from actively putting anti-repair things in their devices. I mean, this is counterproductive. They're basically wasting their own time making their products hard to repair. As it was mentioned before, we do need a reasonable amount of access to proprietary tools and equipment and parts. I think it's reasonable that independent shops should be able to purchase OEM parts at a reasonable price. And they should not prevent the use of quality aftermarket parts, including potentially superior parts. Okay, so that there's always a counterpoint to these things. Some would say authorized repair shops are the answer exclusively. Some would say so-called insurance. And also the tech companies would complain that cry foul about their intellectual property, specifically source code. So why not authorized repair only? Well, it's expensive. It's more expensive than an independent repair. Sometimes with brand new devices, it's the only option because they don't make the OEM parts available. It's hard to get aftermarket. Some companies are talking about this like self-repair, and it's a joke because it costs as much as it would to take it into their service center or send it in. So it's not saving you any money. It's not consumer friendly, as has been noticed. Authorized repair centers tend to be in only in major cities. Like there's a few in the Twin Cities, but there's none in Greater America. And also they don't have to provide appointments and things like that. I mean, you could have a long line or just not be able to get in. Also, they can just say this device is too old, we don't want to fix it, and you have no other option. You can continue. A lot of people claim insurance is the answer, but when you really crunch the math between the premiums and deductibles, it's more expensive than just paying cash for your repair. There's a tons of exclusions and other shenanigans. Also, I don't even know if why this is legal, but the insurance companies actually bought up a chain of repair shops, and they force you to go to that repair shop if you want to. Also, the service can be poor. They can just basically swap out your device with a refurbished one, and there's nothing you can do about it. As was mentioned, there is no reason why the tech companies have to give up their source code or their trade secrets. They keep turning this into sort of a slippery slope, and basically they're saying that if they allow people to repair their own products, that somehow they're going to need the source code, and that's never been the case. And things can be like the board views and circuit diagrams and stuff. It can be deduced just by looking at the boards. There's really no reason why they can't make them available. And as been mentioned before, having the right tools and equipment would make the process safer for not only the technician, but also for the end user. You can continue. So there's always this argument that what's good for a US company is good for America in general, right? These tech companies are the darling of the stock market for a while. But are they really US companies when they're incorporated in like Ireland and they make all their stuff in China? So essentially they may help out one area of America, say San Francisco, but they're not really doing anything for Minnesota. This is a picture of my shop. We're down in downtown Shakopee. Feel free to contact us with any inquiries or questions. We will be having questions asked at the end of the presentation if you have as well. So, Stu, take it away.
Thank you, Dustin. I'm gonna have to come visit you. I can look down at a broken phone screen right now, but I'm Stu Lourey. I am the government relations director for Minnesota Farmers Union, and we're a grassroots general farm organization that was first organized in 1902 in Texas and in 1918 in Jackson County, Minnesota. And we were first organized. We came out of the cooperative movement and were first organized around kind of the principles of a fair economy. Farmers were seeing the folks who sold them inputs consolidate, and they were seeing their prices get jacked up. And then on the other side, they were seeing the buyers of their agricultural products consolidated as well. So they said, hey, we gotta come together, form cooperatives to collectively purchase products and make sure that we're getting a fair deal for the work and the value that we provide to our economy and for feeding everyone. So I like to think about that when I think about right to repair and why we care so much about this issue and competition more generally, because I think that's exactly what we're facing today. 95% of large tractors are made by three companies: John Deere, CNH Industrial, and AGCO. And, John Deere makes up more than 50% of that that market. What these companies do, and I won't go into too much in depth because I think it's been covered well, but they these large tractors, combines, expensive farm machinery relies on digital technology for the machine to basically communicate with itself. So much like your car will get an error code when there's something mechanically wrong with it, a combine will get an error code and it will run at 10% or won't run at all. And then you need to bring it to a dealership in order for them to fix it and unlock the machine. So our members really care about right to repair as a practical matter. And also as a matter of principle, as a practical matter, when their equipment breaks down during planting or harvest, that's hugely costly. Farming is all about timing. There's often very short windows to get your crop in or take it off the field, particularly in a state like Minnesota. And if you have a repair and need to wait for a technician to get over to you or travel a great distance in order to bring your equipment in for a repair, that can be very expensive and cumbersome. I think this issue of right to repair has also contributed to the consolidation of dealerships. You see big chains of authorized dealers purchasing up and closing smaller repair shops, as well as pushing independent repair shops out of business through their monopoly on repair. And so farmers have to travel further for those repairs. All of that makes it more expensive to farm and makes it harder and particularly for small and mid-sized operations to spread those repair costs across fewer acres. So we care about it in practice, but we also really care about it as a matter of principle. I loved that Emily started her section of this presentation with that simple value that, we think if we own it, we have the right to fix it. And for farmers, we're not just using or our members aren't just using heavy equipment. We're also using cell phones and computers to manage market trends. And those are hugely important pieces of what we do as well. So we care about it more broadly. So before I turn it back to Emily, I'll cover just a couple quick points. First, farmers, like I think others have said, they want the right to repair, not to modify. That's hugely important. We hear that from the manufacturers when we're in legislative conversations that, farmers want to tune their equipment and skirt emission standards. That is absolutely not true. And if farmers want to break the law and do that, or anyone does, they use pirated software and do that anyway. This is about folks who are operating within the bounds of the law and want to keep their equipment in good working order. I also like to point out too, which is kind of obvious, that we're not asking for anything particularly new. Before equipment started relying on that digital infrastructure, folks would repair their equipment all the time, right? So I think sometimes the manufacturers can present this kind of this is going to be revolutionary, but there's a bunch of ag equipment out there. It's actually going up in value. There's some interesting stories about that because folks don't want to muck with the digital infrastructure because it's so hard to work on. So analog equipment is going up in value at auctions, and farmers are repairing it themselves. Finally, a point you might see, or as you hopefully talk to legislators about this, you'll say, where I heard from this guy, Stu, about how important right to repair is for farmers. And they'll say, well, I read some headlines that I thought that got fixed because the American Farm Bureau Federation signed an MOU with John Deere. And what I hope you'll tell them is that is not the real deal, unfortunately. But first of all, that MOU to me doesn't seem very new. John Deere committed to a statement of principles in 2018 that I don't think they held themselves to. This looks like a new version of that. It doesn't cover everything that it should. There's giant loopholes for Deere to continue to safeguard their monopoly on repair, which our partners PERG did a fantastic report where they showed that John Deere makes as much as 6 times more on repair than they do on selling the equipment. So they depend on their monopoly on repair in order to make money. And finally, the MOU has no teeth. Either party can leave it. If they're found to violate, it's null, but it is really, unclear to me what the downside for Deere of breaking this MOU and continuing with the status quo would mean for them. And absent that, I think it's really important to pursue legislation. Not to mention that there are many other companies that haven't signed such an MOU, and it's really important that we cover them as well. So we're eager to get this done this year. This is important for Farmers Union, and we're really excited to be in coalition with the folks on this call and the other partners that Emily mentioned, and looking forward to the conversation and the rest of this call.
Thanks, Stu. Appreciate that. All right, a couple quick slides, and then if people have questions, please, I haven't seen too many more in the chat, but add those. What are the next steps and how can you get involved? First of all, I want to mention that we're excited to announce we have confirmed chief authors in both chambers. So Representative Fisher will continue to be the chief author in the House, and so we've appreciated his championing this for the last session. Senator Rob Kubik from Moorhead has agreed to lead the Senate side, so we really appreciate that. We obviously, anybody, additional senator or senators and representatives can sign on, but those are the lead folks. So if you know them, please let them know that you support this. The language, as I mentioned, is being updated to clarify the fair and reasonable definition, and then it's in the process of getting a bill assigned. And then, of course, as I mentioned, AG Ellison mentioned it in a House Commerce Committee recently, so we appreciate that. So how can you get involved? First, connect with Reuse Minnesota. I actually realized I started this without introducing myself. Reuse Minnesota I was so excited to get started, but I'm Emily Barker. I'm the executive director, and Reuse Minnesota is an organization that's been around for 10 years advocating for the reuse sector, including all things repair. And so we are a convener and advocator, promoter. And so we're not the lead necessarily in the coalition, but we have agreed to kind of house a lot of it on our website and do these kinds of things because we do of the way that our organization works, that we already are a network of places. So if you go to our website, /right to repair, you can see that there's not really much updates right now, just as I mentioned, there's no bill numbers, but you can find that there. You can follow our social media, and anyone registered for today's event will get added to our Right to Repair email list. Follow the bills. As I mentioned, again, not assigned, but I've created a little thing on My Bills. If you've never followed the legislative process, the Minnesota legislature uses My Bills, which is a handy tool, so you can follow all sorts of bills you might be interested in. But if you follow ours, which we'll put online, these bills will be included. And then contact your legislators, let them know early and often that you support this work, and we'll provide some talking points for whether you want to call or email them, but be sure we'll let you know when committee hearings are happening so you can write in and make sure that those folks hear your voice. Here's our contact information for all of the presenters today. And at this point, I will note it if there's any questions. Let's see. Is there a letter of support template one can receive? Yeah, so Nathan, that's a great question. We don't have that yet, just in part because we don't have the bill numbers. We'll want to include that in any letters of support that we would do. But I think there's also some opportunities for different coalitions that will write their own letters, or different associations. So like the Solid Waste Administrators Association and Association of Recycling Managers, there's some government folks that are supportive, different groups. There will be letters like that. But yes, Nathan, there definitely will be opportunities for those types of letters. And of course, if you're a Reuse Minnesota member, we've done a survey of our members in the past. And so we always write a letter and often testify as well. So there's those opportunities. Are there any other questions? Tess, great question on the governor's position. I think I don't know, Stu might know a little bit more too. I think sometimes it's hard to know exactly right away. I think generally he's supportive. Like anything, when it comes to these types of things, there's always a lot of different pieces on the chessboard, if you will. But I think overall, Governor Walz is supportive of right to repair, and we understand that if it comes across his desk, it sounds like it would move forward. So we're not too concerned about that. I know there was a comment earlier about how do we avoid what happened in New York with getting it watered down. One advantage is we are on the other side of an election. I think in New York, there were some concessions made because of the fact that there was a governor election in terms of that horse trading. And so I think that that's something we fortunately he's coming into the beginning of a term. So this is a great time to pass this type of legislation because you're not worried about that kind of thing. Fantastic. Well, we are right on time. And as promised, I'm going to let you make sure you get to dinner. I want to make sure that if anybody, again, has questions, you'll know this presentation will be up online very soon. And so you can follow our website. We'll send out some follow-up things, but know that you have a voice at the Capitol with all of us who are doing this work, and we would love to add your voice. And so we thank you for being here tonight and for learning more about right to repair. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.